All right. So I decided to switch this call off of a nutrition topic because this is something that we get a lot of questions about. I think more on Aaron's side. Obviously I get questions on the guy's side as well, but progressive overload is a is pretty a broad understanding of the application of resistance training, program design, and there's a lot of science that goes into this aspect of it. I know we get asked multiple times, and I still have clients that I trained for years and years and years that still use my programming because we ran that option over at our brick and mortar forever. So progressive overload. I'm just going to give you guys a brief overview, high level overview. We'll dig down into some areas to give context. That way you will have better understanding for yourself on how to uh, help with the application side of your workouts. Okay. So progressive overload, why challenge the body to transform strength, muscle, and metabolism as we age or in uh, it's they call it the fountain of youth because they've never been able to mimic the response of progressive overload or resistance training in any type of drug. They're still trying to do that. It's funny because I had a client that was from Lilly, and she even talked to me about this and running labs over at Lilly, and they're still trying to mimic the physiological response that weight training has on the body. So, but anyway, that's a whole nother topic. So, what is progressive overload? You probably hear this a lot in slang and thrown around in this industry. It is actually, and it should be a structured format, outlined intentional increase in training stress over time. So, I know people ask, and I think they ask more, Aaron, hey, can you teach me how to do the program design? If it was that simple, but yes, there is some concepts and science and understanding that I will briefly touch on that may give you a better understanding of why you guys are doing certain movement patterns and how you should or how we change the programming every 4 weeks and why. So here's some methods that and there's a lot more, what we give you guys is quite a bit, because my background was in the performance side. So everything that I was taught and used to apply was to see how you could push the body to the limits of performance, how fast you could get, how strong you could get, and and with keeping you safe, right? And what's the potential of the body in the application. So you guys are getting a level of that type of training because I had to obviously squeeze out the risk factors a lot for you guys and pull that down so that way we keep you safe, but still give you enough stimulus to keep you progressing. So there's different methods you can apply in the application. So you add load. Okay, what does that mean? You're adding weight. Now, is that every set? Maybe. If you're doing 3 sets of 10, so again, I'm going to put some of these science and application components to your specific um, real world scenarios. Let's put it that way. So let's say if you had 3 sets of 10 reps and whatever movement that looked like for you. Ideally, if you did the first set of 10 reps and you say, you had 50 pounds that you did and you hit all 10, full range of motion, felt comfortable, controlled, checked it off. Maybe you go up 5 pounds. So try 55 for the second set. If you were able to hit all those in the same format, you may be able to move up to 60. Again, limiting factors would be range of motion, making sure you're safe, making sure you're in a controlled manner, so keeping the tension on the muscle. But that's just an example of increasing load. Now, increasing repetition. Well, you'll see that with, hey, we maybe increase the reps or we decrease the reps. That's just a way, or sets. That's just a way to manipulate the load and or intensities of the application. Increase time under tension. Now, what this is going to mean, and you'll hear me refer to this quite often because this is a big thing that a lot of people miss and or um, in a form when they're doing the range of motion or repetition. Keeping tension throughout the range of motion is very, very important. And, I see too often that individuals may let the tension off. What I'm saying there is that they may let it bounce, or they may use a stretch reflex to move it through the range of motion. So anytime you can keep tension or time under the tension for that range of motion, it's going to be more beneficial. And some of you guys have done this and some of you guys have not, but time under tension is manipulating the speed of the movement. So it's typically we'll put it into a tempo format, and nobody likes doing this, including myself. I don't. It's not a fun application part of a workout, but time under tension would be slowing the range of motion or the movement pattern down. So if you're doing a squat, you would do a tempo style. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to the bottom of the squat. You could pause and come up fast, or you can go slow down and slow up. Some of you have been exposed to that type, some of you have not. There's a rhyme or reason for that. And that's how you manipulate time under tension with controlling how fast of the speed of motion with under a load. You can also manipulate reduced rest intervals, and you'll see that in the superset kind of components where you go from one exercise to the next with little to no rest. And then increase density, which increased density means manipulating reps and sets. And increase complexity. Complexity is the type of implement maybe you use. You go from a dumbbell to a barbell, and, and maybe maybe you add some type of band to the barbell. So that would be a little bit more extreme. But there's just complexity of the movement patterns, and you can go even into speed of complexity, which is explosive movement patterns. And some of you, again, we have all different fitness levels, and some of you individuals may have not gone through all what I'm talking about, which is fine. Um, because ideally, we want to build a really, really good foundation before we start pushing you to more advanced type programming. So, why does it matter? Body adapts to stress. That's number one, and I see this too many times. Is stagnation. Is a person does the same thing, same workout. Well, it's not going to be effective over I don't know, really 6 weeks. Um, so you need some type of variation change, and there's a lot of different ways to change that stimulus. So the adaptation will stop. You'll hit a plateau, and sometimes what I see with this is individuals hit a burnout marker point and or put themselves at higher risk for injury. So why is it so beneficial for progressive overload manipulating some of these variables? Fiber recruitment. So what I'm talking about there is your muscle fiber recruitment patterns. There's a lot of different ways to manipulate that. Obviously, the strength aspect, bone density, conditioning, lean mass, and your metabolic efficiency. So these are all just benefits of progressive overload and resistance training. And all these are very important for long-term health. And some of these may be more of an impactful component to you personally. Maybe it's a metabolic factor, but then you're going to gain all the other components if you increase your lean tissue. See, you're going to have a better recruitment pattern, strength, bone density, all that good stuff that comes along with doing progressive overload. So I talked a little bit about time under tension. And this is just going over it because I'm kind of repeat myself because I got ahead of it. But slow eccentric, eccentric is a shortening and lengthening reference points to muscle fiber. So slow eccentric increases mechanical tension, which it keeps tension uh, on the fiber and fatigue. And then there's a hypertrophy aspect. You're going to hear us talk about hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is just getting the muscle bigger. I know when I say that, a lot of women will look at me, side eye me. Um, it is a lot harder to put hypertrophy or muscle mass on women. So just trust me in the process. I've worked with high level women athletes that lifted a lot of weight, and you look at them and they you can tell that they lifted, but you wouldn't know that they lifted the weight they did. So, you know, and it's a different beast for women to put muscle mass on. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. So these are different phases that I like taking individuals through, and I kind of named him to have fun with it. And this is all back to our brick and mortar, which we've rolled all this programming over into being able to be adapted to any situation, whether it's a home gym, whether it's dumbbells, whether it's kettlebells, or a full facility if you have access. So when I say armor building phase, uh, we use a lot of hypertrophy or higher rep components to build that foundation. We may use complexes at the end to finish as well. So high rep squats, controlled tempo for maximum time under tension. So there's a lot of different ways to, and when we say armor building, what we're trying to do is get your muscle in better condition, get you stronger through range of motion, become a little bit more resilient, and put a little bit of lean tissue on. Again, for women, it takes a lot longer, but they will notice they're going to be stronger, they're going to be more resilient, and their day-to-day activity is going to get a lot easier. So that's why we call armor building. You want to have that no matter what age, because it's going to help protect you through injury prevention and your day-to-day activities. And then we talk about strength adaptation. Strength begins in the nervous system. So when you guys start any type of resistance training, if you haven't been lifting, so say if you've been off for 2 or 3 weeks, really after the first week, you're going to start seeing a detraining phase. Uh, and unfortunately, that happens. That's why I tell people never to stop lifting. Lift as long as you can because it's one of those things you don't want to stop. Okay. So if you hadn't been lifting for, 2 to 3 weeks and come in to do any type of resistance training, whatever level that looks like, your central nervous system is impacted first. So what you will notice when, the first 2 to 3 weeks is your ability to move through a range of motion with a specific load will get better, and your coordination will start to feel better, and your stability will start to feel better. Well, a lot of that is your central nervous system, the communication, electrical system, because many of us, it may not be a natural, and it's not a natural component to be under load through a range of motion. What I'm saying with that is whether it's pushing something away from you, whether it's doing a squat under a specific load beside your own body weight, and even then through a full range of motion with body weight. So resistance training or any type of load through a range of motion affects your central nervous system because that's the main component. That's the ability for us to have muscle contraction. It's the pathways, the communication pathways. Again, I'm dumbing this down because it goes much more science-based than this. And I'll touch a little bit on this because I'm going to go into improves motor unit recruitment. What's that is the central nervous system communicating to the muscles to fire together. So you're going to have, with strength, you're going to have a firing rate, a coordination stability. So when I'm saying firing rate, it's less. So what will happen when you do a muscle contraction? Those fibers start to fatigue. When one fiber fatigues, it'll recruit the next fiber, the next fiber, the next fiber. As that one fatigues, it goes to the next one. That is the firing mechanism. Interesting part with our body is we never have 100% muscle contraction. You know why? Because our tendons would not be able to handle the load. And that's really the interesting part about how we're designed is we have some defense mechanisms to prevent some of those components from happening. So with different strength adaptations, we can change some of your programming to get your firing rate better. What I'm saying there is to synchronize your muscle fiber to contract in a communication pattern to lift more weight. So that's going to get you stronger because you can get stronger without putting a ton of muscle mass on, and that's more from the central nervous system. Okay. What you will notice once you get into consistent resistance training, and this is a funny component that I always talked about because we've trained one of every age, all the way up until almost, the 90 marker point. And I think we did have some 90s in the gym at one time. Anyway, some people would always some had some concern with balance and falling and getting more stability. And they would ask, hey, how come we don't do, all these balance activities within the program? And I said, hey, all the program does have balance components within it. It's just kind of disguised. Uh, so anytime that you do consistent resistance training, your coordination and your stability and balance will naturally get better because you just like riding a bike, if you continue to ride a bike, you know how to do it, right? So if you continue to stimulate your central nervous system and communication patterns to muscle contraction, you're going to have better stability, better ability for coordination. So your coordination will get better because the communication patterns are better, and then your stability gets better. So those are all just different components that happen with this. So anytime you guys, and again, some of you may have not been through this low of strength phase. Maybe you're not built up to that yet, but we may push you through different strength phases. A strength phase is going to look like rep schemes of 1 to 5. Even 8, we'll start getting in there. 6, we'll start getting in there. But down to 5 is starting getting, fairly heavy up to 70% of your max. Okay. And you're going to have a little bit longer rest periods because you just can't recover when you start lifting heavier loads. And then here's different phases that you may notice within your program. So when I talk about GPP, this is where everybody starts, general physical preparedness. And that's where it may start out very basic for you, and we will progress you because injury prevention is number one, right? So we want to build a foundation for you to be healthy and be able to do the resistance training. So we will start increasing volume, movement, quality, and we'll get you through that phase. And then we may, depending on fitness and level of individual, some people we push into some of these other phases a little bit quicker than others because their experience level, and that would be burn density and conditioning. We do a lot of that stuff within the program. So we may manipulate the rest work intervals. We may add some complexes at the end that's really going to help your cardiovascular conditioning, and then also your ability to do work for extended period of time. So the density of the workload goes up, and your general PPE goes up as well. So your overall conditioning gets better, and you'll notice that in day-to-day activity. The strength aspect, we may use heavy compound lifts, we may not, because you can still get strong with machines. But there's just a different component that's a little bit more advanced without machines. So there's just different ways to go at it. And then the armor, you heard me talk about this, is a time under tension hypertrophy. Again, it takes a lot more effort for that to be effective with females. It just is. Here's the kicker with the resistance training, and one of the components that benefits everyone and is so important for longevity is your metabolic tissue. Muscle is metabolic tissue that drives your resting metabolic process, which is going to be huge for the fat loss uh, phase and the fat loss component. The other thing that people ignore, it's a huge impact for your hormones is your insulin sensitivity. I've worked with diabetics in the past, and when they first came to me and they started resistance training, I said, "Hey, your A1C is going to get better just from you doing resistance training." I had a guy not believe me, but he went back and did his A1C and talked to his doctor, and he's like, "Yeah, Well, the more adipose tissue you carry, the more impactful it's going to be on your hormones and the sensitivity and the functionality of it long term. So you want to have that good ratio of lean tissue in comparison to fat mass. So insulin sensitivity, hormones, joint and bone health, those are all going to be big impactful components of metabolic tissue. Because when you put a little bit of muscle mass around the joints and get the connective tissue stronger, so your muscle, ligaments, and tendons, it's going to be injury prevention, and then it will also act as a shock absorber. So you're not going to be putting as much tension on the joint because your conditioning of the muscle and the connective tissue is so much better. Again, another reason why you um, want to consistently always do resistance training if you can. So, lack of strength training leads to muscle loss, fat gain, slower metabolism, reduced insulin sensitivity, weaker bones. And that's going to be a big impact on longevity. Okay. It's an indicator of you're going the wrong direction. Okay. So, you just can't replace some of the components that muscle mass does for the body. And then when you guys heard me talk about the differences in uh, adipose tissue or not adipose tissue, put on lean tissue, the big obviously component that's going to be different for men and women, high testosterone. So men, we can put more lean tissue on faster and have adaptation because of high testosterone. And then obviously with resistance training, the metabolic process is going to impact your testosterone and allow men to keep better testosterone as they age. And again, that's going to keep all the other systems better as well. Slower decline until sedentary. Okay, so it really impacts how you start losing the testosterone level or reduction of testosterone as we age. Women, obviously, they have lower testosterone. What happens if you do not do any resistance training or you stop doing, estrogen drops, accelerates muscle and bone loss. So that metabolic process or that stimulation to keep those hormones in check is very important. So progressive overload maintains lean mass, carb tolerance as well because your insulin's better. So with you putting on lean tissue and your metabolic process goes up, you have a little bit more flexibility with carb response and how you respond to carbs because your insulin response is better. Okay. There's going to be a mitochondria impact, mitochondria health, okay, hormonal health, anti-inflammatory function. Another thing that will happen, and again, they can't mimic this with medication. Now you can mimic it some with a sauna that gets up at least to that 180 marker point. With resistance training, there's a mechanical response, and there's a with that mechanical response, the core temperature goes up. Okay, when the core temperature goes up, it impacts your heat shock protein, and with your heat shock protein being affected, your inflammatory response overall will drop. So a person who does consistent resistance training has less inflammation in comparison to a person who does not. Now, you also want to make sure you're doing the other things that we coach and teach within this program, managing your stress, making sure your food is in check to keep the inflammation down, making sure you are working on your sleep because that's very important. And then we teach, hey, movement instead of going out and doing other cardio because we're trying to manage your inflammatory response and keep it lower because there's going to be a lot of benefit to that. So with muscle, I mean, it's such a big impact on your hormonal stability and balance. It improves your testosterone utilization, your growth hormone response, thyroid efficiency, your blood sugar stability, and it's going to reduce your overall cortisol and manage your inflammatory response. So all that across the board is a huge win-win. Now, if you're coming into it where you have some instability within your hormonal balance, I know we talk a lot about getting tested and looking at things. You do have to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together, and we try to fix all those components and make it a better homeostasis. That way, when you are doing resistance training, you're creating a better environment for you to impact your testosterone, impact your growth hormone response, your thyroid, your blood sugar, without pushing your cortisol way up. We see so many times, and this happens with men as well, but it doesn't impact men as much as it does women. They'll come to us inflamed because they're doing too much. More is not always better. The quality, I would say, is going to be very impactful. So again, this is there's a lot of science components to this with progressive overload. I'm going to talk a little bit more off the cuff, more about the questions we get. Again, if you roll into a new program, the first week, 2 weeks, you're going to typically have some type of muscle response or soreness, which will go away. The best thing you can do is go walk or move the day after your workout. Okay. As far as how to push yourself with rep sets, make sure you stay within the boundaries of how we have the structure set up as much as you can. What I'm saying there is that if we have 3 sets of 8 reps, try to do 3 sets of 8 reps. Okay. But what you want to do is try to use a weight that you can't do 10 reps with. And if you can get all 3 sets of that weight, of those 8 sets, the next time you come back to that movement pattern, you may want to go up 5 pounds. So think of it that way. And in the app, you will see the structure of other rep schemes within that movement pattern. So what I'm saying is if it's a squat, you may see, hey, you did this weight for 7 reps of a squat with the barbell. And if you're going to try to do 10, you can look at the 7 and say, okay, maybe I should back that weight down and try to match it up. So ideally, you want to look and do a little bit of investigation prior to setting yourself up for that first set, because once you start tracking within the app with all the data points, that information's there for you to kind of compare and look at and say, okay, um, what do I need to do? Do I need to go up and weight? Because you should be. You want to challenge yourself. And I will say this, if you get to the last set, say it was 8 reps again, and you got 6 reps and you gave it all you could and you got good range of motion, you're good. It's okay to fail sometimes. That's a thing that we always would have to communicate within our brick and mortar, because so many times people would undercut their ability to go to a failure component or close to failure, specifically in a safe manner. So, it's okay to push yourself and maybe you just miss that last set of the rep scheme. And it's safe that happens. Say if you missed it by 2 reps, you don't necessarily have to go make those 2 reps up because you pushed yourself hard enough and you got close enough and you're going to get enough stimulus to the muscle to have adaptation of what we desire. Okay. Those are just some examples. Again, um, I know I'm going to start pulling some other reports, which as this AI gets better, and the ability to kind of pull some of your volume of your workouts, I'm going to play around with it this week and see if I can't, uh, get some of those things to you on that Friday. Basically, it'll tell you and give you kind of an overview of what you did with your workouts. I think that's important, uh, to understand. But there's some other charts and graphs that we have now that the AI software provides us as coaches that we can look at and see if you're progressing on some of the movement patterns. And I will shoot some other videos and show you guys. But what I'm going to try to do is get a report out to you. As long as you're doing your tracking and doing your resistance training, it'll kick you out some information, give you an overview of what you did. Okay, so hopefully this helps. This is a topic. It goes. I mean, it could go a lot deeper, but it's one of the foundational components of the program. And many times we see individuals do this the wrong way. Uh, and people always ask, can you teach me how to do the programming? Well, yeah, there's a ton of science with hip hinging and movement patterns and biomechanics, and then the application science understanding of the central nervous system and the firing of the muscle through a range of motion. So it goes a lot deeper than just throwing some weights around because we want to keep you guys, safe and progress in the right direction. So hopefully this helps. A little bit off topic, but it was a topic that I thought we could throw in here and it'd be very beneficial. I know Aaron's going to talk a little bit more, I think, this week on the hormonal impact. I just barely touched it, because I think that's a big one because you can use progressive overload in the right format to help naturally balance out some of the hormone responses. But again, you have to do all the other pieces as well. So, all right. So I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Moderation. You can still have some of the sweets, but just you don't have to have the whole pie. So enjoy yourself, and I will talk to you next week.